personal definition of jazz and what it is to me, it's a tradition for me that allows me to express my identity. It's an art form that allows me to express my identity and to express myself, my thoughts, my experiences as an artist. And not so much, necessarily a genre musically or technically, but it's just a beautiful way of self-expression, more especially, I think, identity-wise. I think the marriage or the relationship between jazz and that hunger to know or knowledge, I think it stems from this notion that jazz, was more known to be an intellectual's music. Very elitist, very sort of intellectuals, and a very niche kind of genre where only people who were of a certain intellectual capacity could relate to the music, purely because it's such an unconventional style of music. And I think because if you look at the jazz greats, if we think about the likes of Thelonious Monk, Miles Davis, Chet Baker, the list goes on, John Coltrane, very spiritual. And they were very kind of well-read as well, very philosophical. And I think it kind of stems from that. And I think that tradition and that need and that marriage and that celebration of intellect and the music kind of went together. I don't know if it's still so much like that now, because I think jazz is becoming an intergenerational kind of art form and it's taking on different shapes. But I think also the nature of the music just lends itself to that. It lends itself to wanting to read and trying to understand and grow in terms of how you interpret jazz, because it's so open-ended. So the interpretations that people have of the same music are so vast. And I think the more well-read you are, or the more knowledgeable you are generally, or the more kind of philosophical, with inverted commas, you are, the more it's believed that you can kind of interpret this music and internalize it. I believe there is a very distinctly South African jazz sound, and South Africa, in fact, is one of the very few countries in the world who have their own sort of sound. And if you think about, you get obviously Cuba and you get Latin American and that kind of thing, but to have a purely distinctly South African or a sound jazz-wise, South Africa, and I think it stems from the age of Marabi, which one can say, but that was a combination of American swing, with African lyrics and that kind of thing. But I think the South African jazz sound is very much, it's very much embedded in the experience of South African life. If I think about the 1950s, if you think about the merger of Penny Whistle, Mbaqanga, Marabi, and you think about the context under which that music was played, it kind of just infused and absorbed a particular sound that became very South African. If you think about when you listen to the music of Jonas Gwangwa, you listen to the music of Kaifa Semenya, you listen to the music of Hugh Masekela, Abdullah Ibrahim, it's you cannot mistake it for any other music, for music from any other part of the world. The marriage of, there is a very strong relationship in jazz between the melody and the harmonies. So, like I was saying sort of earlier, that because I play the piano, I know exactly what chords are underlying that particular melody. And it is really just paying attention to detail. So I could sing a melody, and I could embellish it, because in jazz we embellish all the time. We improvise. So the whole thing is, normally you'd sing the first sort of round, the first chorus of a song exactly in that melody, the right melody or the composer's melody. And then the second time when you sing it, you can play around with it. And the notion behind that is that when you sing it exactly the same, the first time round, it's paying homage and respect to the composer, after which you can throw it away and do your own thing. But within doing your own thing, when you're embellishing, if you don't have a rich understanding of the harmonic progressions happening underneath you, you could embellish in a way that kind of, where the melody then starts to contradict the harmonic structure happening underneath. So I think when I speak to that in the dissertation, it's about being able to sing and embellish and really move away from the melody, but still respecting and still being within the harmonic structure of what's happening beneath you in terms of your accompaniment. And that's where, you talk about the intentions. The University of Cape Town's music library, when I enrolled for my master's back in 2008, 2007, had very little about South Africa. In fact, when I studied jazz at UCT, I think we spent about a lesson or two on South African jazz, and that was it. And I mean, that's ridiculous if you think about it now, And while I was doing my master's, obviously, then we had to place orders. We had to order this music and these CDs and these books from abroad. Because the interesting thing was that you couldn't buy them in South Africa. Those records were not available here. So, we had to outsource them. And also trying to obviously get the information. It's hard because you get on the internet and there's nothing there. There's nothing solid there. And but I think because obviously my study was more analytical more than anything else, I really just needed the recordings. But if someone's going to do a study that's more ethnomusicology kind of, or someone was wanting to do research of a more worded nature, then it would be hard. Is it changing now that we are free, or now that we have greater access? It's changing slowly, and the reason why I say slowly is because academic institutions are not ready and are not yet well equipped curriculum-wise to teach South African jazz in the broad scope that it deserves to be. So now we're sitting in a situation where students are registering at universities and saying, but we want to study South African jazz. And you're finding that the lecturers there are sitting going, but we also don't really know. I think it's incumbent upon us as young musicians now who are studying or who are schooled to really write and to read and to document and to study and to go to the musicians, and to find out what are their stories, and to write about them. Because I think it's the only way that the South African jazz curriculum will grow. I know that ideally we wish we could kind of go to university and it's there. But who would have written it? You know what I mean? Who would have written it? So I think it's incumbent upon us as, the born frees or, people who have access now to this, to write about it so that in 10 years' time, or 20 years' time when other young people go go online and search Winston Mangungu or search, Johnny Jani, they'll get lots of stuff on there. But we can't wait for anyone else to do it. We have to, unfortunately or fortunately, create this curriculum of South African jazz. Voice or piano, or voice and piano, which came first? Piano. So I started classical piano, very early on in my I was 12. So classical piano came first and the voice came later. And in second year varsity, I'm just trying to cut a long story short, second year varsity, the voice then started to really, really take over, in terms of the piano. But I think, it's what makes my career personally quite interesting and my process is the marriage of the two, because I write on the piano. So I've never written a song sans piano, without a piano inside. So it's my instrument of composition. And I find that it helps me a lot because I always know exactly what I want the music to sound like. And I think if I wasn't a pianist, I probably wouldn't have such a clear idea of what I want the music. I have such a clear sonic idea in my head of what I want my music to sound like because I've written it myself. Voice, yeah, I think the voice has definitely taken center stage. But I think visually it's quite nice, when you play and sing. When you speak about timing and diction, timing is quite a heavy-weighted one, because timing one could be singing in time, so in the rhythm, and also it's about singing in the rhythm, singing in the pocket. We've got this phrase in jazz, where you're in the pocket in terms of timing. And timing is, you can be ahead of the time, you can be behind the time. It's all part of the whole playing around with phrasing in terms of jazz. And then diction is clarity, pronunciation, words, when your words are crystal clear. And the two are such are two like sort of landmarks of technical of jazz vocal technique is timing and diction. With timing obviously goes phrasing, but diction very important, and I stress this quite emphatically when I teach, which I don't do as often anymore, that sometimes singers get so involved in closing their eyes and lost in the moment and just kind of like vibing to the point where you don't hear what they're singing about. And diction really speaks to really respecting the text.